Beyond the Golden Gate Bridge awaits glorious Marin County, home to sweeping vistas, diverse cultures, and inspiring causes. Join us for Marinterviews, profiling people and projects, creating a meaningful impact in our community. Hi, welcome to Marinterviews, where we showcase people and projects making an impact in our community. I'm Sandra Riley Grimshaw, and joining me today is Greg Maloney, who has started a fabulous project called Gifted Guitar.
Gifted Guitar.
I cannot wait to hear more about it. So how did it start? Was this
Yeah.
through
No,
COVID?
this is kind of a COVID project.
That's so great.
COVID hits 2020
Like
March-ish.
right now,
March,
years
yeah,
ago.
2 years ago.
Right now.
And we at the studio, I worked at the studio, and we cut our hours, and I had this extra time, and I've always wanted to build a guitar. So I thought, I'll finally build this guitar, right, that I've always been thinking about building. Well, it's a long story, backstory on the guitar. The first time I tried it was a complete failure. It was about, 8 years before that. Put everything away and forgot about it, but now I had this extra time, so I decided I was going to start building some guitars. So I started building a guitar, and I had to get over that hump where you want to be perfect. If it's not going to turn out perfect, you don't want to do it. That was a big hump for me to get over. So at one point, one of my friends, my luthier friend, says, just build the damn thing and see if it sounds like a guitar. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. So I did, and the first one sounded like a guitar. I was surprised. I went, holy shit, this sounds like a guitar. And while I was doing this process, it went from 1 to 2 to 3, and I'm on 10 now. But during that process, that first year, I think I'm working on number 4, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with these things? And I wasn't really interested in going the retail route and selling them and doing that whole thing. It's just not what I was about. And I'm sitting there looking at this thing, and I'm going, well, suppose there's another way to get it in somebody's hands. And then I thought, well, who would that be?
And how?
And
how? Would you find them?
And how would you find them? And how would you figure out, how do you do that?
During a pandemic, by the way.
Right, during a pandemic. So I started doing some research and talking to people, and I decided that what I wanted to do was get my luthier friends together and myself and have guitars and create a fund that we could purchase the guitars from the luthiers. So luthiers are basically, I think, the most underpaid profession in the world. It's long work, 250 hours go into a guitar.
Oh my gosh.
And, when it comes out, the luthier maybe makes $25 or $30 an hour.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, so one of my tenets is that I wanted to pay luthiers a fair price for their guitar. The second tenet is I wanted to find kids that were disadvantaged, that just needed some help, just needed a little boost in their career. So that was the second thing. And I started mulling this over in my mind, and I thought, well, let's start talking to people. And so I reached out to the Guitar Foundation of America, which is kind of a big deal in the classical guitar world. And I talked to a woman named Connie Hsu, and I say to Connie, Connie, this is what I'm doing. And she goes, and I've heard this so many times, wow, that's a great idea, Greg.
Right.
What I want to do is I want to find kids that are, want to go into the classical guitar world, want to go into, say, a conservatory or a college musical program, and are doing it with a substandard guitar. Because there's a lot of different levels. And I wanted to make sure that whoever that kid was had the guitar that would help him succeed. So Connie says, well, that's a great idea, Greg. Let me think about it. And about a week later, she calls me back, and this is all before I was really ready to do anything. I hadn't really raised any money to do this yet. And she calls me back, and she says, Greg, actually, we have this kid in Cleveland who is just amazing. Comes from inner city Cleveland, first kid in his family to go to college.
Oh, my gosh.
Got a full scholarship to Oberlin, which is a big deal in the classical guitar world. So he got a full scholarship to Oberlin Conservatory. His name's Damien Gogans. And Damien is this wonderful individual that is just so sweet and so talented. His story is basically when he was in high school, his teacher says to him, you need to start taking guitar lessons.
So a teacher actually noticed a talent
Noticed,
and nurtured
no,
him.
didn't necessarily notice the talent. She just said, you need to start. They had a classical guitar program at the school, and she said, you need to do this. And he goes, I don't want to do that.
Oh, wow.
And she says, well, if you don't, I'm not going to pass you. And he goes, well, I guess I'm going to do that, huh? And so he tries it, and it turns out that he's a prodigy.
Oh, my gosh.
He's so naturally talented. And for somebody who didn't start playing the guitar at age 5,
Right.
to be as good as he is
wow.
highly unusual. So
And he was how old when they found him? Is he a high school student?
he was a high
Is he-
school student,
Okay.
right?
All right.
He would have been a high school student.
Yeah.
So Cleveland, believe it or not, which blew me away, has a phenomenal classical guitar community. And his first teacher was named Eric Mann and is the Classical Guitar Society's director of the guitar part of their classical society. And Connie puts me in touch, Connie Shue puts me in touch with Eric and his new teacher at Oberlin, Steve Aaron. And between those two guys, and I had told her, I said, Connie, this is a little premature for me. I need to raise some money. And she goes, okay, well, just let me know. Go talk to these guys and see what you think. So in the meantime, I raised some money. I had actually told Connie initially, it was a really funny day. I pick up the phone, I'm talking to her, I go, Connie, I'm just not ready for this. I hang up the phone. I think, if not now, when?
Right?
Right? If not now,
Absolutely.
when?
And what do you got
I
to
immediately
lose?
called her back. I said, Connie, okay, we're going to do this, right? So I talked to Connie, told her, she gave me the contact information, and I started talking to these two teachers. And I told her I don't want to notify Damien as to what we're doing until we can make it real.
Right.
And so at some point I had the funds, and then the next thing is I had an idea what guitars I would take out to Cleveland for him to try. And I'm talking to on a totally separate subject. This is the kind of things that have happened along this path. On a totally separate subject, I'm talking to this guy named Jeff Wells, who's a collector and a connoisseur of pre-modern guitars. Okay?
So is he in Marin or is
He's
that?
in Marin.
Okay. So
And Jeff's in Marin.
Right.
And I was introduced to him by somebody else, not important at the moment. But Jeff is talking to me, and he was going to connect me to the guys at the conservatory in the city, San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And then I'm talking to him on the phone one day, and he goes, Greg, who you really want to talk to is this guy named Chris Mallett. Chris runs a conservatory, a program down on the peninsula. He and his partner are phenomenal musicians. They are kind of the first black classical guitar duo in the United States, and they're really good.
wonderful.
And
again,
so
here,
I call up Chris blind, and I tell him what I'm doing. And again, wow, that's a great idea, Greg, right? So Chris says, well, really, what you should do, Greg, is you should talk to this guy named Glenn Cannon, and you should consider a Glenn Cannon guitar for Damien. All my students love Glenn Cannon. I play his music. I play his guitars. They're fantastic guitars. So I'm going, so where's Glenn Cannon live? And he goes, north of San Francisco.
Oh
You
my
go
gosh.
across the bridge, and it's one of those towns, right? And I go, so I go, you mean Sausalito? He goes, no, the other one. You mean Mill Valley? And I go, he goes, yeah, Mill Valley, that's the town. So I go, okay, I'll look up Glenn. So I look up Glenn. He
my
lives a
gosh.
mile from me.
Oh my gosh.
So I call Glenn, and this is another story that's kind of interesting. I call Glenn, and I say, can I come over and talk to you? So I go over to Glenn. I tell him what I'm doing. He goes, wow, that's a fantastic idea, Greg. And we're talking, and I said, what's your build time? What's your wait time? And he goes, it's about 2 years. And I go, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
For Damien's
Wow.
guitar.
Yeah.
That's, and that's the way good builders have lead time.
That totally makes sense.
So he goes, and then he has this sly look on his face, and he goes, actually, I have a guitar coming back. One of my customers wants a 640 scale, which is, the scale is from the top of the nut to the nut to the bridge.
Okay.
And the normal guitars, at least in the classical world, are usually 650. He wanted it a little bit shorter. People with smaller fingers. I play 640. Wanted a little bit shorter
Okay.
scale. So Glenn says, I have this guitar coming back. It needs to go to my finisher to have one nick taken off of the top because the finish is pretty delicate. And he says, you can have that guitar. I go, really? So I'm going.
Timing,
so I know.
kismet.
Timing, kismet, whatever.
Wow.
It's just crazy.
I bet your heart burst.
I know. It was like, oh my God, So then I wait for a month. I set up my trip to Cleveland. Take another couple of guitars with me. Go out to Cleveland. Meet Damien. We sit down and play the guitars that I had. We went to a shop in Shaker Heights. A man named Armand Kelly has a really fantastic classical guitar shop in Shaker Heights, which is just outside of Cleveland. Played a bunch of his guitars, came back and settled on the Glen Cannon, right? Which is kind of what I was hoping would happen.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I didn't want to force Damien into something that he wasn't comfortable with. So he picked this guitar. I came back, took the funds that I had accrued for the guitar. It was about a $12,000 guitar.
Wow.
And it was way above my price point for the guitars that I want to use and do. But Jeff Wells, who turned me on to Chris down on the peninsula, while I'm talking to him on the phone, he goes, Greg, I'll give you $5,000
That's great.
to get him a better guitar or a more prestigious guitar. So I said, wow. So that allowed me to get Damien a very expensive, very nice, wonderful guitar by a local maker, Glen Cannon. And Glen is phenomenal, really nice guy, phenomenal builder.
Well, and of course, my son might know this, but I don't. I know, what, Fender.
Yeah, no, everybody knows Fender,
I don't know,
right? Les Paul, Fender,
it's like, okay, but then,
all the rock and roll.
And then you've got this
guitars.
guy here. So, do you have partners? That is such a great story. And you have more. You've done. What's your total now that you've done? And then
well, he was our first. I'm
Yeah.
working on my second.
Okay.
And it's the guitars are there. The money's allocated.
Okay.
It's just a matter of connecting the East Coast with me. So what I'm trying to do right now is sort of get it more local, so it's easier to deliver these guitars. Because one of my sponsors said to me one day, he says, Greg, your delivery system is terrible. It's just, it costs too much.
You're hand delivering them.
Well, there's plane flights, there's
Yeah.
hotel rooms, there's
Yeah.
Uber, there's, all these expenses that he said, people that are going to support you are not want to see their money spent on that kind of stuff. And so I said, yeah, you're right. So I'm trying to at least get it localized, more localized till we can grow it. But when this happened, Steve Aaron calls me, his now teacher at Oberlin College, Damien's teacher, calls me and says, I have this teacher out in, it's not PV, it's,
Southern California? Or?
No, this is a teacher out in Tennessee.
Oh, in Tennessee.
And I think it's Tennessee, and God, I should know this. And his name is Stanley Yates, and he has a student that might be of interest. So I called Stanley, I talked to Stanley. Turns out that Stanley is another one of those names in the classical guitar world. This is like an education for me. I'm talking to Stanley, and Chaz comes from a family of 7. His dad is a journalist. His mom stayed at home. He was homeschooled, and his dad asked Stanley if he would just sit down with Chaz just once and give him some pointers on how to play the guitar, because his dad had played a little bit, rock guitar, and wanted to, and Chaz got interested, and he taught him everything he could, which wasn't a lot, but he taught him what he could. And Stanley says, yeah, sure, I'll do that, but I don't give lessons. Stanley does not give private lessons. And he sits down with Chaz, and about an hour later, he agrees to give the kid private lessons, because here's another talented individual, right? And so Chaz is playing a guitar, nice guitar, but it's not a conservatory guitar. It's not a college, musical
There's a quality level.
There's a level,
Yeah.
and there's a lot with the classical guitar. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of beauty that can be brought out of a better guitar. And
So he'll be number 2?
so he'll be number 2.
Oh, that's terrific.
We're going back and forth. Chaz was going to come out by himself. I want Stanley to come with him. They had offered to come out here because Stanley apparently might have travel funds from the university he teaches at. So, or if it becomes too conflated, I'll just
Right.
take guitars and go see them.
Yeah, because these
Yeah.
are not things you want to ship.
Right.
You know?
No, it's, you know, and people do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, they're shipped all over the world, but it's not my preference.
So your future plans, are they to continue this? Can people
Yeah, no,
help? Can they donate? Can
yeah.
they contact you? Because we'll put that up on
We
our...
have so the Gifted Guitar site is Gifted Guitar singular giftedguitar.org because it's a 501.
Yep.
It has 501 status, so
Terrific.
donations are tax deductible. Yes, of course, I'm looking for funds for future people, for future kids. And the other thing that I'm doing right now is reaching out to conservatories and music programs finding more students that are in this, you know. And it's been an education, you know. How do you vet the student? How do you know that they're actually, you know,
Passionate.
they have to be passionate. They have
Yeah.
to be, you know, they have to be involved in it. They have to want to do it. They have to want to do it after college. They have to not have the financial wherewithal,
Right.
which is a big one, right? And you know, and they could be anybody. You know, it's not.
But if
race.
they haven't been exposed yet, there's
Right.
that rock and a hard place. If
Right.
they don't have the means, they may not have been exposed. So if somebody somehow has found their calling, it would be wonderful for you to find more students.
Right, and it usually comes out of, you know, there's guitar programs all over the country, and it usually comes out of one of those programs. There's guitar programs in inner city LA. There's guitar programs all over the place, and those programs are usually a teacher will identify a kid, say, "Wow, that kid's really good," and more times than not, that kid's in a program is not necessarily well off.
Right, exactly.
So,
exactly.
and that's who I'm hoping to connect with and give those kids a chance
God, what is...
and maybe change the world one guitar at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
you
Good for
know.
you. Now, I think this is just the perfect project to highlight on our little series, and we will make sure we put up all the information on our site and get you a link
Oh, great.
for your purposes, and we will just keep our heads, you know, you put the word out there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Well, you know, somebody totally that you had no idea was interested in guitars comes to you and says, "What can I do to help?"
How is your outreach primarily done right now? Is it just you dialing?
Yeah, it's right now the whole thing is me.
Yeah,
I
it's a
had
big
somebody
job.
who I was working with, but he's fighting kind of a illness that he has to deal with. But
Well, day jobs can get in the way also. I'm
Yeah,
sorry
no,
about
they
it. So
do. They do,
Day jobs can
you
get
know.
in the way, but boy, there's been a shift during
Yeah.
this pandemic that we were talking about before, and I think this is just,
you know, it's interesting. It wouldn't have happened without COVID.
right. Isn't that
It
amazing?
wouldn't have happened without COVID because it would have been I might have built a guitar or something, but you
Yeah.
know, I'm on number 10 now, and I don't think it would have happened without COVID, and I don't think that's an uncommon story right now.
I think you're right, and I think those silver linings are what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
So thank you, Greg, for this.
You're
we will
welcome.
wrap up this edition of Marinterviews, and we will have all the information on our site, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Marinterviews, produced in partnership with Marin Arts, Marin Link, Truce, and D2ISF. Please join us on our mission. Nominate a person or program to be profiled either in studio, location, or Zoom. Sponsor a segment. We look forward to working with you.